AITAH for not wanting to pay $100,000 for my daughter's wedding. What do the groom's parents want? They said they would pay for everything, and now they want to split the bill. So, this might be a bit of a long one, but I need to get it off my chest. I, female, in my 50s, have 3 daughters. All amazing in their own way, all strong-willed, all opinionated, all independent, exactly how we raised them to be. The youngest of my 3 just got engaged, and instead of feeling the excitement and joy I felt with the other 2 weddings, I'm walking around with this pit in my stomach that I can't seem to shake. I'm not even sure who I'm frustrated with anymore, the groom's family, the expectations, or myself. So I need some perspective, and maybe even a little emotional gut check. When my first daughter got married in 2021, it was the height of COVID. Everything was smaller then, guest lists, venues, budgets, expectations. She and her now husband had a beautiful wedding that we managed to pull off for around $15,000. And honestly, it was magical. There were only 75 guests, but it felt warm and personal and so full of love. It was held at a gorgeous outdoor venue that had just reopened, and we got insanely lucky with vendors who were giving steep discounts just to get business again. My daughter picked a simple lace gown, did her own makeup, and had a friend do the flowers. I remember watching her walk down the aisle and thinking, this is it. This is everything a wedding should be. She was over the moon. She still says it was the best day of her life. She didn't feel like anything was missing. After that wedding, we reaffirmed with all 3 daughters the same thing we had told them when they were younger, that we would give each of them the same amount of money for their weddings. Fair is fair. It didn't seem like a big deal at the time, and everyone agreed that it was a good system. No drama. We weren't rich, but we had saved, and we felt it was important to offer something meaningful to help them start their new lives. Fast forward to now. The youngest is engaged, and things are very different. Her fiancé's family is more traditional. And by traditional, I mean extravagant. They believe weddings should be these grand, formal, multi-course banquet affairs with crystal centerpieces, a live string quartet, and imported roses flown in from wherever roses are fanciest. From what I've gathered, they've been dreaming of this huge wedding for their son since he was a baby. It's not even coming from him, he'd probably be just as happy with something low-key. But the moment that ring went on my daughter's finger, it was like a machine kicked into gear on their side. Suddenly there are talks of a guest list nearing 250 people. Of a cathedral ceremony followed by a ballroom reception. Custom calligraphy invitations. A dress that costs more than my first car. Champagne towers. A live band and a DJ. Late night bites. Luxury linens. A damn horse-drawn carriage. I wish I was joking. I tried to stay quiet at first. I smiled and nodded through the early planning talks, thinking maybe it was just the excitement talking. Maybe things would settle down once the logistics kicked in. But the further it goes, the more real it's all becoming. And with every vendor meeting and Pinterest board update, the more my stomach churns. Because here's the thing, I don't want this. I don't want to bankroll a wedding that feels more like a performance than a celebration. I don't want to pour tens of thousands of dollars into a day that's more about impressing people than about love. I don't want to go into debt or drain our savings just to keep up appearances for people I don't even know. When we sat down to talk numbers, I told my daughter the same thing I told her sisters. We had originally planned to give $15,000 each, but we understand times have changed, so we were willing to increase that to $25,000 to reflect inflation and rising costs. That's our number. That's what we can comfortably give without resentment or regret. She didn't fight us on it. In fact, she was surprisingly calm. She said, that's fine. They want the big wedding, they can pay for it. And by they, she meant the groom's parents. Apparently, they've already hinted at covering the difference to make the wedding of their dreams happen. But now here's where it gets messy. I still feel uneasy. On paper, everything seems resolved. We offered our contribution, she accepted it graciously, and the in-laws can take it from there. But I can't shake this feeling in my gut that something's off. I'm watching my daughter get swept up in this princess wedding fantasy that doesn't even feel like her. She's always been the chill one. The type to wear Converse to prom. The girl who once said she'd elope in the mountains or get married barefoot on the beach. Now she's picking out Swarovski-covered heels and letting a planner dictate the aesthetic. I worry she's trying to please people and losing herself in the process. I brought it up gently, very gently, and she insisted she's fine. She said she's happy. That she wants to make everyone feel included. That it's not a big deal because she doesn't have to pay for it. But that's where I struggle. Because it is a big deal. This is still her wedding. Her marriage. Her beginning. And I can't help but wonder, if the groom's parents are footing the bill, are they also buying influence? Are they going to start making more decisions? Pushing harder? Controlling the vibe? I already hear the subtle hints, the passive-aggressive comments, the, well, we are paying for it, energy slipping into the planning. And my daughter, sweet and peacekeeping as she is, just nods and goes along. The worst part? I feel like the bad guy. Like the frugal, uptight mother who's raining on everyone's parade because I won't open my wallet wider. I keep thinking, should I just suck it up? Should I match what the in-laws give to even the field? But then I remember how excited my first daughter was to use some of her wedding budget leftovers for a honeymoon, then to put a down payment on her house. That money mattered to her in a real way. It helped her start her life. That's what I would rather do now. I would rather give my youngest daughter the $25,000 and say, use it however you want. If that means spending it all on the wedding, fine. But if not, here's a chance to set yourself up for something more long-term. I just know that if I cave to pressure and contribute more toward a wedding I don't even believe in, I'll end up feeling bitter. And that's the last thing I want to feel when watching my baby girl walk down the aisle. But if I don't, will I seem cold? Will I be labeled as the unsupportive mother while the groom's parents play fairy godmother and win all the praise? I keep playing this over and over in my head, and no matter what angle I look at it from, I still feel stuck. And sad. And a little angry. I just want to feel the joy I felt with my first daughter's wedding, but instead I'm stressed and uncomfortable and second-guessing every decision. Am I being unfair for sticking to our original offer? Am I wrong to prioritize future stability over one day of spectacle? Am I being the bad guy in a story I didn't even want to be a character in? I'm just tired. And really hoping someone out there gets it. Update 1. A few weeks had passed since our budget talk, and for a brief moment, I actually felt a sense of calm. My husband and I had held firm on what we could contribute, $25,000, no more, no less. We weren't demanding control over anything. We weren't dictating colors or venues or menus. We simply said, this is what we can offer, and you're free to make your own choices with it. Our daughter accepted that. She even reassured us, telling us not to worry, that she didn't expect anything more, and that the groom's parents were happy to take on the rest since they wanted something bigger and grander. So we stepped back. For the first time in weeks, we exhaled. I stopped overthinking every flower choice and every catering quote and started mentally preparing for the idea of just being guests at our daughter's wedding. That alone was hard for me to accept, not because I wanted control, but because I wanted to be emotionally invested in the day. But I told myself, this is adulthood. This is what letting go looks like. We give her what we can, we offer support when asked, and we trust her to steer the ship. Then came the night of the dinner. It was supposed to be a simple evening. Both families were getting together for the first real sit-down to talk logistics, finalize timelines, and begin the process of collaboration. I picked a neutral outfit, rehearsed being pleasant in the mirror, and even convinced myself that things might feel lighter once we all broke bread together. I kept telling myself that everyone involved wanted the same thing, for the couple to be happy. For the wedding to be beautiful. For this to mark the beginning of something joyous. The restaurant was one of those places with soft lighting and linen napkins, fancy but not too fancy. Our daughter and her fiancé were already seated when we arrived, smiling nervously like they were hoping this would be a turning point. Linda and her husband, both dressed as though they were attending a gala rather than a family dinner, arrived just a minute after us. We exchanged the obligatory pleasantries, complimented each other's outfits, and ordered drinks. The first half of the meal passed without drama. We talked about honeymoon ideas, shared old wedding stories, and even laughed a little. I started to let my guard down. Maybe this was the reset we all needed. Maybe, in the absence of planning pressure, we could just be two families looking forward to celebrating our children. Then came the toast. Linda raised her glass, and I noticed immediately that her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She cleared her throat and began thanking everyone for being there, for supporting the couple, for being part of this beautiful journey. It all sounded sweet and diplomatic, until she slipped in the line that made my stomach drop. She said, in the smoothest tone imaginable, that she and her husband had reconsidered things. That after much discussion, they had come to the conclusion that it would be best, most fair, if both families shared the cost of the wedding equally. She said it like it was a gift. Like she was offering us some elevated, noble position. Like this was an act of generosity, not a bait-and-switch. The room fell completely silent. I looked at my daughter, whose smile faltered for just a second. She looked confused, almost dazed, like this was news to her too. The groom looked straight ahead like someone who just witnessed a car accident in slow motion. It was clear that this was not part of any prior discussion. He was caught off guard as much as we were. My husband put his fork down, always a sign that things are about to shift. I gently placed my napkin on my lap and tried to collect my thoughts before reacting. We had been crystal clear about our position. We were not against the wedding. We were not trying to scale down their vision. We simply were not in a financial position to bankroll a large-scale event. We had offered our $25,000, which we felt was not only reasonable but generous considering the original agreement years ago was $15,000. But Linda didn't stop there. She continued speaking, her voice as sweet as syrup and just as sticky. She began saying how it was only right that both families be equally invested in the beginning of this marriage. That it would feel strange to her if one family contributed so much more than the other. That it would feel, as she put it, uneven. And then came the not-so-subtle implication. She said that if we didn't want to be a full part of this big moment, then perhaps it would be best for us to simply step aside and not interfere. Interfere. That word hit me like a slap. I wasn't interfering. I was trying to respect their vision while staying within our means. I was trying to be supportive without being resentful. But to her, if we weren't willing to match their spending dollar for dollar, we weren't truly involved. We were being difficult. We were undermining this sacred day. I glanced at my daughter again, hoping to see some sign that she disagreed, that she would speak up. But she looked torn. She was caught between two families, two worlds, and I could see the emotional gymnastics behind her eyes. Her fiancé looked mortified. He muttered something to his mother, but it was too quiet to catch, and Linda didn't even flinch. My husband calmly but firmly repeated what we had said from the beginning, that we loved our daughter, supported this marriage, and had given what we could. That our contribution wasn't a reflection of how much we cared, but of what we could realistically afford. That we were not going to put ourselves into financial strain just to match someone else's expectations. He said it plainly, without heat, but with finality. Linda's smile tightened. She took a slow sip of her wine and nodded as if we had just insulted her in another language. Then she let out this little sigh, the kind that says, well, I tried, but with just enough judgment to make it sting. And then she said something about how some people just don't understand what it means to be part of a wedding. The rest of the dinner was a quiet, tense affair. We picked at our entrees. No one mentioned seating charts or flower arrangements or honeymoon flights. Even the couple stayed mostly silent, clearly realizing that this dinner had taken a turn no one wanted. The warmth from earlier had evaporated, replaced by something brittle and bitter. We said our goodbyes politely, because that's what adults do. But there were no hugs. No promises to follow up. No talk of next steps. Just a shared understanding that a line had been drawn, subtly, but undeniably. The dinner ended not with fireworks, but with a cold farewell. Update 2. I never thought I would hear this kind of sentence said with a straight face, much less from my own daughter. But there we were, sitting in a little local coffee shop on a chilly Saturday afternoon, the kind of place that serves oat milk in everything and plays soft acoustic covers of 90s pop songs. My daughter had invited me out, just to talk, which, in our family, usually meant something was brewing. She brought along a friend from college who was in town visiting, a bright, articulate young woman who had always struck me as thoughtful, albeit a bit idealistic. I assumed it would be a casual, catch-up conversation. I should have known better. At some point, after we'd all settled in with our overpriced lattes and awkward small talk, the conversation pivoted back to wedding planning, as it inevitably does these days. I could see it in my daughter's eyes before she even opened her mouth. The hesitation, the emotional exhaustion. She looked tired. Not physically tired, but the kind of bone-deep weariness that comes from too many opinions, too many decisions, and too much pressure coming from every direction. And then it happened. Out of nowhere, my daughter glanced over at me, then back at her friend, and said, in the calmest voice, "You know, my friend suggested an interesting approach. If he proposed to me, then logically he should pay for the wedding." I blinked. I looked over at her friend, who just nodded like she'd quoted some revolutionary feminist manifesto. I choked a little on my latte, trying not to literally spit it out. I felt like I had entered some alternate universe where TikTok had officially replaced centuries of social structure and common sense. The thing is, I knew where the idea came from. I've heard the murmurings. The cute little hot takes that go viral for being bold and unconventional, usually written by people who haven't paid a real bill in their life. These posts get shared around with hashtags and applause emojis, gaining momentum until they sound like gospel. And suddenly, we're in a world where proposing equals financial obligation, where weddings become some kind of pay-to-play contract, and where logic is twisted into convenience. But then I looked at my daughter again, and I realized she wasn't joking. She looked serious. Not self-righteous, not smug, just emotionally worn out. She explained that she had been feeling pulled in two completely opposite directions. On one side, her fiancé's parents were pushing for this big, opulent wedding that checked all their boxes. On the other, she had us, her own parents, trying to stay supportive while holding firm on what we could realistically offer. And in the middle was her, a woman who just wanted to get married without becoming collateral damage in a battle of expectations. She said that the idea of whoever proposes, pays, gave her a kind of strange moral clarity. A way to mentally detach from the storm. If he proposed, then he and his family should own the process. Handle the bills. Make the decisions. She felt like that gave her a kind of ethical permission to back away, to stop trying to juggle everyone's feelings, to stop trying to appease both families while draining herself in the process. I didn't know what to say. On the one hand, it sounded childish. A tidy solution to a messy problem, drawn with a crayon where ink was needed. Weddings aren't transactions. They aren't debts to be collected or redistributed based on who got down on one knee. On the other hand, I could feel the truth underneath her logic. She wasn't trying to be clever. She was just tired. Deeply tired. She wanted peace. She wanted to walk down the aisle without feeling like she was tiptoeing across a minefield of family resentment and financial guilt. She was tired of being the bridge between two families who could barely sit through dinner together without tension simmering just below the surface. She was tired of planning a wedding that no longer even felt like her own. She was tired of making decisions only to be overruled or guilt-tripped or undermined. She was tired of the unspoken scoreboard that seemed to be keeping track of who gave what, who said what, who did what. I looked at her and saw a girl who used to dream of a small wedding by the water. Who once told me she'd be happy with just a dress, a sunset, and someone who loved her. And now she was here, trying to rationalize a way to opt out of her own wedding because it had become too much to carry. I didn't argue. I didn't lecture her. I just sat there, nodding slowly, letting it sink in. Because I got it. I really did. It wasn't about the money. It never really was. It was about power. About identity. About emotional bandwidth. About how easily weddings become less about love and more about performance. And how quickly that performance can drain even the strongest people. Her friend said something about modern relationships and how the old rules don't apply anymore. I half listened, distracted by the image of my daughter sitting at a wedding she didn't want, paid for by people who would take it as permission to make it theirs. I thought about the difference between stepping back and being pushed out. Between letting go and being excluded. I realized then that my daughter wasn't trying to get out of anything, she was trying to protect herself. To create distance from a situation that was spinning out of control. And while I didn't fully agree with her logic, I couldn't blame her for wanting out of the tug-of-war. Still, I knew I had to say something eventually. Not then and there, but soon. Because weddings aren't just about money. They never were. They're about joining two lives, yes, but they're also about standing up for yourself. About deciding what kind of foundation you want your marriage to be built on. About learning how to make space for your own voice in the noise of everyone else's opinions. About figuring out how to say no, when no is the only thing that keeps you whole. And this was a moment she would remember. Not the flower arrangements. Not the playlist. Not the signature cocktails. But this, how she navigated conflict, how she asserted herself, how she claimed her own wedding without being swallowed by it. I paid for the lattes and we walked out into the crisp afternoon air. Nothing was solved. But something had shifted. A recognition, at least, that this was bigger than decor and dresses. Weddings are not just about the budget, they're about choices, compromises, and boundaries that need to be set. Update 3. Last Saturday, something shifted. And it was the kind of shift you don't expect when you've been stuck in the same cycle of stress, confusion, and passive-aggressive text messages about color schemes and cocktail napkins for weeks on end. This time, it wasn't another vendor meeting. It wasn't a passive invitation to a group chat filled with links to outrageously priced decor. It wasn't Linda sending Pinterest boards with themes titled things like Gatsby Elegance or Timeless Opulence. No, this time, the groom himself asked for the meeting. He wanted all of us in the same room, both sets of parents, just us and the couple. No planners, no stylists, no distractions. And to be honest, my husband and I didn't know what to expect. We half worried it would be another round of subtle guilt-tripping or a last-ditch effort to persuade us to throw in more money, or worse, to compromise, in that way where one party gives everything and the other gives nothing. But what we walked into was completely different. We met in the groom's apartment, a neutral zone with just enough chairs for everyone and no performative ambience. My daughter looked a little nervous but calmer than she'd been in weeks. Linda and her husband were already there, sitting quietly, oddly subdued. And then the groom, who had been something of a background character in all this wedding madness, kind and supportive but rarely vocal, opened the conversation. And the first thing out of his mouth was this: I think we've all forgotten a little bit what this wedding is for. It was quiet for a moment after that. The kind of quiet that doesn't demand a response, just reflection. He looked tired. Not just physically tired, but emotionally wrung out, the way my daughter had looked in that coffee shop a few weeks ago. His suit was wrinkled, his shirt half untucked, and there was this weight in his voice that made it clear he wasn't delivering a speech rehearsed in the mirror. This was raw. This was real. And then, finally, we had a conversation. A real one. No budget spreadsheets. No floral arrangements. No side eyes about who was doing more or spending less. Just a circle of adults talking like adults, stripped of all the noise and pretense. We talked about how we, the parents, had started to feel pressured, exhausted, disconnected from the celebration we were supposed to be excited about. I shared how I had started dreading every new email thread about logistics, how I feared resenting the day that was supposed to be joyful. My husband admitted that he had stopped even reading the updates because every message seemed to bring new costs and new complications. The groom opened up about how he didn't want a flashy wedding. That he wasn't interested in making a statement or impressing people. He just wanted to marry my daughter and celebrate with people who mattered. He admitted he had gone along with his parents' vision because it was easier than saying no. Because, like my daughter, he didn't want to disappoint anyone. My daughter finally spoke about how lost she had been feeling. How hard it was to find herself in the midst of everyone else's dreams. She said she didn't know who the wedding was for anymore. She had gotten so caught up in the chaos that she forgot what she wanted in the first place. She said that for a while, it didn't even feel like her own wedding anymore, it felt like a public production starring her as a guest. We circled back to the original idea, the one that seemed so simple in hindsight: if someone wants something expensive, they can pay for it. And that goes for everyone. Not just us. Not just the bride. If the groom's parents wanted a grand celebration, then the financial responsibility should match the ambition. And then something remarkable happened. Linda, who had been quiet for most of the meeting, spoke up. And not in the passive-aggressive, performative way I had come to expect. She didn't sigh dramatically or lace her words in condescension. She just said, "Okay. If we want it, we'll pay for it." And she meant it. She admitted that she got swept up in the excitement. That she wanted to create a celebration for her son that reflected how important the moment was for her. She said she hadn't realized how much pressure she had been putting on everyone else. That her intentions were good, but the outcome was starting to hurt the people she loved. And she didn't want that. For the first time since this engagement began, we were all on the same page. So, here's where we are now. The wedding will happen. And yes, it will still be big. But not big by pressure or default or guilt. Big by agreement. Big because the people who want it big are stepping up to make it happen on their own terms, with their own means. We are sticking with our $25,000 contribution, just as we planned. Nothing more. No resentment. No compromise that asks us to go beyond what we can or should give. And my daughter? She's coming back to herself. She's no longer ghosting her own wedding. She's starting to enjoy the process again, not the guest list or the menu tastings, but the real things. She's thinking about how she wants to spend the morning of the wedding, peaceful, surrounded by her sisters, listening to the music that makes her feel grounded. She's picking her vows carefully, not just pulling them from some Pinterest template. She's asking us about family traditions we might want to include. She's asking herself what will make her feel present that day, not just beautiful. And I, for the first time in a long time, feel hopeful again. I can picture that day now. I can picture her walking down the aisle and meaning it. Not just smiling for the cameras, but feeling every moment. And I'll be there, watching, knowing that we didn't fold, that we didn't lose ourselves in the storm. We held the line, we stayed kind, and we helped guide our daughter to a stronger, healthier version of herself. Because this isn't just about a wedding. This is about how two people begin their life together. How they learn to speak up, to compromise, to listen. How they build boundaries without shame, and how they invite others in without giving away too much of themselves. And for us, as parents, it's about teaching that lesson by example. After all, it will be her day. And our boundaries are also a gift. Because we are teaching her what a healthy start in adult life looks like.